You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the first season finale of Star Trek Prodigy called Supernova Part 2. Part 2, the quickening. Never mind. I'm Dom Bettinelli.
This time it's personal.
Yeah.
I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek, where you find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. We're also on Instagram at StarQuest Network. And leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you on our social media. I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called Raising the Bets. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. And I also want to mention we have some great feedback at the end of the episode, so stick around for that. We have some really nice feedback from last time. Before we get to talking about Supernova, I just want to talk about what's coming up on Star Trek and Secrets of Star Trek. So now that Prodigy is finishing, the next new thing coming from Paramount Plus for Star Trek is the third and final season of Picard. That's going to be starting in mid-February. And then that goes through April. And then Discovery will be in there somewhere probably, but we're not going to be talking about Discovery on the podcast as a regular episode.
We don't talk about Discovery.
Well, Father Cory and I do. We talked about it in a special, like all of season 4 in a special patron episode.
Yes.
That we're giving the patrons. We'll probably drop that in the feed at some point before season 5 of Discovery comes along.
So if you want to hear that earlier, it'll drop here this week as we're recording this week. And so you can become a patron at sqpn.com/give and join our patron and listen to what we think of it. We had fun.
Yeah, we did a lot of ranting. But we won't talk about that, episode by episode on the this podcast. But then we expect Lower Decks season 4 to drop in August, because Lower Decks so far has always dropped in August. And then Strange New Worlds after that, maybe in October. So there'll be a nice big run of us discussing classic Trek between April and August. If that's something, I've heard from a lot of folks like, oh, I really like your discussions about these new shows, but I missed you talking about classic Trek. So we're gonna get back to that right after that. So
also we'll have some classic Trek before Picard starts.
Right. Yes. Between now and the beginning of Picard, we've got a bunch of things, including a couple episodes. We just talked about this. A couple episodes prepping for Picard season 3, because we know that the holographic character James Moriarty from TNG is going to show up. So we're going to talk about those 2 episodes before Picard season 3 comes along. So very good. All right. So let's get back to Prodigy in its final episode. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happened?
Last time, the living construct began infecting Starfleet ships and creating a cascading, seemingly unwinnable situation, with new ships becoming infected as soon as they arrived. To solve this problem, the kids decide to destroy the protostar. This will apparently stop the virus, even though that isn't how viruses work. To minimize the damage caused by the explosion, they decide to proto-jump away from the battlefield as they destroy the ship. This will stretch out the damage over a long stretch of space instead of concentrating it in one solar system. The kids will escape in a newly manufactured shuttlecraft, but someone must stay behind to pilot the protostar. Holo Janeway volunteers, saying that they can bring a backup of her program on an isolinear chip, but she discovers that her program has grown so large that it won't fit on the isolinear chip, so she lies to the kids and stays behind to sacrifice herself. After the protostar is destroyed, the kids learn the truth about her sacrifice. We then flash to Earth a month later, and Starfleet has learned that the protostar's destruction created a wormhole to the future, and they get a message from Captain Chakotay. A rescue mission is planned, and biological Janeway insists on being on it. She also gets the charges against the kids dropped, but instead of getting them into Starfleet Academy, she has them sworn into Starfleet as warrant officers in training under her command. Except for Gwen, who leaves to make contact with her home planet Solemn in hopes of preventing the conflict from the original timeline. Before Gwen goes, she promises to come back, and she gives Dal a kiss. Our final sequence is of the kids meeting their new ship, which is part of the newly approved Protostar line, and Janeway tells them she has big plans for them, which points us towards Star Trek Prodigy 2, The Search for Chakotay. The end.
All right, let's start at the beginning, which is a good place to start. The kids, we've talked about this last time, how the kids have really matured, and they're still kind of silly at times, but they have a lot more maturity about approaching situations. And in this case, they've decided that to save others, they must sacrifice themselves, which is a fairly mature, although they're not going to, they know that they're going to try to escape in a shuttle, but there's still this idea of sacrificing the ship and sacrificing what they had gained. And that's a fairly mature attitude.
Yeah.
And
it also reminds me of that scene from the end of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, where in order to save Crystal Cove, Fred must sacrifice the mystery machine, and it goes crashing across the screen, and Fred says, "What have I done?" And Daphne says, "What you always do, take despair and turn it into a fighting chance for hope." Which is a deliberate reference to Star Trek 3.
That's right. I was thinking, that sounds awfully familiar. You know, the sacrificing of the iconic vessel, whether it's the Mystery Machine or the Enterprise, I remember back then watching, seeing the trailers, and I could not believe they would sacrifice the Enterprise. Like that it's got to be something else, and seeing it on screen, that was devastating. Not devastating in the big sense, but as a fan, I was like, wow, I can't believe that.
Well, that's where I commented last time how the ships in many ways become as much a character as the actual human crew members. And unfortunately, J.J. Abrams and and Generations have kind of watered down the emotional impact of the Enterprise being destroyed. Because right. I vaguely remember it because I was younger and wasn't quite as in tune with Star Trek as I am now. But I know there was people who were really upset with Star Trek 3 because they destroyed the Enterprise. They destroyed this crew member, if you will.
Right.
But then you get Generations, and they destroyed the D just to get rid of it. And then you get J.J. Abrams, who destroyed 2 ships and damaged damaged right. one to the it was just, it's like, okay, you've lost any emotional impact of this.
They also have the fake out destructions that occur with some regularity. I was watching a second season Next Gen episode at Times Squared, and these days in the streaming they have the notes that will come up. And one of them said, "This is the first time the Enterprise is destroyed on screen in Next Generation."
Yeah, exactly.
So out of I don't know how many, about 6. They seem to do that once a season.
Well, was it Cause and Effect, where it's the Bozeman comes through with the Kelsey Grammer,
right? Over and over.
I was gonna say they had fun trying to figure out what camera angles they could use. And I'm assuming they did, just one model they exploded, but they did different camera angles. But still, they had a lot of fun trying to figure out how many different ways can they show this explosion.
And it was, I remember at the time of Star Trek 3, this, like, what is Star Trek without ships, right? Which is something that we've come up with before is in other series. It's
Deep Space Nine, the best of all of them.
Well, but even the station is still a ship in a sense. It's a place that's specific and that's commanded.
Oh, everything's a ship then.
Well, I guess
in outer it is also a sealed enclosure in outer space that can move, not very often, but does move.
And there's a ship in Friends and a ship in Colombo and a ship in St. Elsewhere, because they're all set on Earth, which is this place in space, and it's got a command structure. And Earth is a ship. Spaceship Earth. People even talk about that.
I think that's stretching it. I think DS9 is it's got a name, and it's a confined construct in space that has a commander. I mean, it's
Earth doesn't have a name, and you can just step off of it anytime you want. It's not confined.
I don't know. Well, listeners, you can let us know which one you agree with. But I feel like, having a ship of a type is a key element in Star Trek. I mean, they in fact even gave it the Defiant eventually, because they knew that they needed to get off the station once in a while.
Exactly.
But
they had runabouts. They just wanted a more badass way of getting off the ship.
Well, that's true. You said ship. So
there we go.
Just pointing it out. So the Protostar, to getting back to Prodigy, had become this ship of Prodigy. It's the defined place that defines this crew, in the sense. I mean, it's another definition, that this confined place that defines this crew. And so they want, destroying it at the end, which I wasn't sure whether they would actually go through with it, but destroying it made me think, well, that's why it's called Star Trek Prodigy and not Protostar, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is a big part of that.
Well,
so
later on we see a prototype, or that the Protostar was a prototype, and now they're making Protostar class. Yeah. So we'll see more of these ships.
And they'd set us up for it by telling us at the beginning of the series this was a prototype.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
It also reminds me of a scene in John Scalzi's novel Red Shirts, which is, it's not family friendly, but it is really funny, and it is and actually really insightful. But it's essentially a pastiche or parody of Star Trek, where the Red Shirts realize they're all going to die.
Right.
That there's this magical bridge crew that never dies no matter what, but we're the ones who do. Now, what are we going to do about this? And so they have to try to figure out how they're going to survive, given that they're living in a universe that's being directed by a television show that requires the main characters to live. And so to prove the danger, we're the ones who have to die. And one of the first things they think of is, let's blow up the ship. and it's we'll set a bomb, we'll get off of it, it'll blow up, and then there won't be any more show, right? No, they'll just get another ship, a better ship.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that is what the showrunners would do, isn't it?
Yeah. Red Shirts is sort of like a cross between Galaxy Quest and Lower Decks. It's kind of a little of that.
There's obviously inspiration for both of those from that book.
Yes. Yes. So Jankum comes up with the idea of detonating. No, Rock comes with the idea of detonating the Protostar's remaining power at the same time the proto-warp, like you mentioned, Jimmy, dispersing it across space and time, they said, which is an interesting. They included time in that line.
A few seconds for start here and end there. That's
well, I think it was
space-time continuum. They're not talking about literally, just the time it takes for the explosion to run through.
Right. And I guess that was sort of a hint at that they're going to be making a wormhole through time by doing this. It was the clue.
I'd have to revisit that line. I thought they just said across space-time, which is a standard physics description of what we live in. We live in space-time. And if you're doing faster than light travel, time actually does become a component, but although they tend to ignore that on Star Trek. But I'd have to look to see if I thought they were making it more than that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I kind of took it just because they include the word time in space time instead of just across a great distance or something like that. Now, interestingly, Dal originally volunteers to go down with the ship as captain, which again is another mature.
And is the loser augment who won't get into Starfleet Academy. Right.
He sacrificed himself to let the others get in. And I thought that was a fairly mature attitude on his part, like that idea of self-sacrifice, that he's willing to give his life for not just his friends, but for everyone, including people he doesn't know. So that was nice. I do also like that they finally figured out that you can copy a holo program and save it. So if you delete one copy, the other copy can exist.
They loaded
get around
too small of USB drives on the Protostar. They get some bigger ones.
Unfortunately, while they've figured out that you can copy a holo program, they have not figured out that you can copy a virus.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is like, okay, you've just created a critical failure point solution for us, because now the living construct, it's not really a virus. It may be using malware to access these ships, but it's the living construct that's forcing them to turn on each other. It's not a virus. And so now you can just destroy the living construct and it'll stop.
Right. And that was actually an interesting thing, because I was thinking about, like, how does destroying the Protostar save everyone else? Because if it's a virus, then it's in all the other ships.
Yeah.
Already. It's copied itself.
But that's just its communication protocol, if you will, that it uses that malware to go from ship to ship to ship to get through their firewalls. Let's use modern day technology. It uses this virus to get through their firewalls and then can remotely control the ships. It uses remote desktop for all the ships and controls them that way. It's not copying itself. It's just getting access to it, and it's all running from the Protostar. So that makes sense then. If you've got a malicious server that's attacking your system, if you can take that server out, your attack stops.
Which seems like a dumb design on the part of the Solomonites, because like Jimmy's just said, a critical failure point. I think
they assume though that the Protostar wouldn't be having a bunch of kids who override it and blow it up.
Yeah, although you would think they should wargame that out. How could you defeat this nefarious thing? Also, I mean, if it's just a malicious server, it's way less of a threat to Starfleet than a virus would be.
Right.
If you've got a virus I can believe can infect every Federation ship, and at least in principle, it could infect every Federation ship and bring them to their knees. How is a malicious server going to do that if it needs to be within line of sight in order to access the ship?
Federation makes it that everybody comes running as soon as there's a problem, and all the ships become line of sight very quickly.
But that's what we're expected to believe, but that's completely unreasonable. Nobody, I mean, even if compare it to the United States Department of Defense, even if you have a big battle happening somewhere and they need to pull in reinforcements, they're not going to bring every ship that's owned by the Defense Department to one location and leave the rest of the Empire completely unguarded.
Right. Just like, I mean, there, and we know that it takes days or weeks to travel from one side of the Federation to the other. And if ships keep going to the spot and stop communicating out, they're going to stop sending ships at some point early on in that. It's a flaw. It is a definite flaw in the concept of what's going on here. They wanted us to think it's in one hand it's a virus, on the other hand it's a central AI remote controlling everything for the convenience of the plot. So that's a little bit of a plot flaw. But okay. So they need to modify the ship in order to get the control of it back, and so Jankum is going to fix it. And Jankum has a nice line. Jankum isn't just an engineer. He's a miracle worker. Nice Scotty reference there. Yep. So we have Holo Janeway. They puts them on their shuttle, which is a very rudimentary, because it's got that 3D printer for shuttles, which should have been on Voyager.
And they don't have a lot of time, so they're having it build the most stripped down shuttle possible. It doesn't even have chairs or artificial gravity, so they're just going to float around in there and hang on to stuff. Right. And actually, when they get off the ship, there are some nice scenes of the kids in the shuttle. And it's silent. There's no dialogue, and they're dealing with the enormity of the situation around them as they're clinging into the interior of this stripped down shuttle they've just built. And they're nice, effective scenes.
And the fact that the shuttle, they basically evacuate the shuttle from the shuttle bay. They don't even power it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just
they just relieve the gravity in the shuttle bay and let it get pushed out
by the air.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting that we kind of end the drama there. I mean, the Protostar warps out, explodes, and the other ships gradually come back. But we don't see the rescue. We don't see there's that the immediate aftermath is skipped, which is interesting.
Well,
yeah,
they
also
say they can't find them, that they were so far away from the fleet by the time they went to proto jump that they couldn't find the shuttle. They forgot to put an emergency beacon on it when they
Right.
They also wrap this up because this has been the main drama in this, that we've been building towards. And they wrap it up in this is a 20-minute episode. They wrap it up at like minute 6.
Yeah.
And we have this enormous denouement, or anticlimax after the climax. And it works, but I was kind of surprised because it's like, wow, we just won at minute 6. Really? Cool.
I kind of feel like it. I mean, I know they called it Supernova Part 1 and 2. I feel like they should have just made one episode, because they wanted to have this huge, what the fate of this crew, what's going to happen in setting up next season. But they had to have part of the action from the previous episode in this one. You know what I mean? So I know why they did it. I just felt like they should have just done one long episode. But
they obviously wanted the cliffhanger of all the Federation ships are destroying themselves and the allies that are coming are insufficient to stop it. So how do we go from there?
Which is a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, it's a very good cliffhanger. It was an excellent cliffhanger. But it was, they wanted that and then realized, it's not going to take much. They could have spread out the destruction of the Protostar over, a whole episode if they wanted to. But they did want this conclusion where we see, okay, we have the happy ending. Yes, you have the separation of one of the members, but you still have the happy ending.
I think at least some of us had the idea that the resolution of this problem was going to be them jumping forward in time to stopping the construct and it's being installed in the first place,
or jumping somewhere in time, because that's the obvious solution if you know how viruses work and you've designed a sensible plan. But they decided to change that on us.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I thought they would undo this destruction because there is massive destruction of Starfleet. Yeah. How many times has Starfleet been wiped out? Like Wolf 359, like all these different times. And it's like, wow, they just keep building these ships and finding more people willing to go on board them out there in the Federation. And so, we don't undo any of this. This is all set. This is what happened. And kind of interesting that they don't.
Also, the kids, after they've left the Protostar, they discover a recording of Hollow Janeway saying, "Sorry guys, disc full. I'm not coming with you." And it's sad, and it is sad, and it is a kid's show, but I'm sorry, Janeway is a toaster.
Right.
Hollow
Janeway is a toaster. Yeah.
It's interesting how the showrunners have figured out a way to keep Kate Mulgrew involved because we've now replaced Hollow Janeway with Bio Janeway. And because it's interesting to me, that's how they sold the show before it came out. It was about these kids who are going to be on the ship far outside the Federation, and they're going to be accompanied by a hologram of Janeway. And now we've got a much more conventional, in many ways, show, apparently, where they're with Admiral Janeway. They're going to be on her ship within Starfleet, per se. So it's kind of interesting how we've in a season have progressed to this different kind of somewhat little more conventional setting. I like that. And I like that how go ahead.
I was gonna say, but obviously they set up for next season what it is going to be the search for Chakotay and crew. So.
Right. Yes. And I wondered, did Hollow Janeway intentionally create a wormhole to the future where Chakotay is?
That's what they said. They presumed that she had guided the explosion so that it created the identical wormhole, because they show the picture of the two of them overlapping and they match.
Right.
And the image of that,
Yeah, and there is a line about it pointing our way to where we need to go.
They also called it an alternate timeline.
Yeah, so this brings up another question I have, because it should be an alternate timeline because they've the knowledge from the original timeline has now been transmitted back to their own time in the form of Gwen, who survives and knows the whole story, and everybody else knows the whole story too. There's this planet out there called Solemn. If you go there and you're not careful, it will start a civil war, and it will lead to this scenario. So my question, and so what they're planning on doing is having Gwen go talk to her people as part of First Contact in hopes of heading this off. They're deliberately changing the timeline. I want to know what Temporal Investigations has to say about all of this.
Well, I mean, in some ways, it's. I was going to say, and maybe I'm wrong, that it changes how time travel works in Star Trek, which we've always had that time travel changes the future. That's the Voyage Home was exactly this question, right? So they go back in time. Well, no, that wasn't exactly the same thing, was it?
No, that really didn't change time. That didn't change the future.
Yeah.
That just brought Wales to the future.
There was the episode where they found Data's head buried on Earth in the 1800s.
That didn't change it either. What did change it was because they left his head there.
That wasn't what I was going to say. But go ahead.
It was the first Guardian of Forever episode, City on the Edge of Forever. That did change time.
And First Contact, as well, as the Enterprise is getting ready to go back in time, they see the Earth changed into a Borg planet, but then they go back and stop that. So
right.
That actually did change time for a brief second.
Right. And the thing with Data's head was that it didn't change time, but this was the time. This was always going to happen. And so it's not that the alternative timelines, there weren't alternative timelines, at least according to the way it has always worked in the past. But maybe because this is the future that we're looking at, I don't know. That's interesting. It's interesting that they've added this idea that Chakotay still exists in the future as part of this alternative timeline.
Well, but they can. I was thinking about that. They could very easily do it that they find Chakotay after the diviner sends the protostar, or after Chakotay sends the protostar back.
Right.
The prototype protostar is gone, and then they find Chakotay.
Right.
And that won't affect the timeline at all.
Actually, it could be if Gwyn is successful, Solemn is fixed, but Chakotay going to the future had nothing to do with Solemn being messed up, so they could still be in that future, but with a Solemn that isn't in trouble. And
he could be one of the rebels that doesn't like the fact that the Solemn is with the Federation, and so he does this plot anyways. I mean that.
Possibly, right.
Because then that won't change the timeline at all.
I just think the current Gwyn mission is seriously altering the timeline the timeline that Chakotay is in. And so if it's going to be weird. It's like, okay, we're going to an alternate timeline to rescue Chakotay while simultaneously we're preventing that timeline from becoming actual.
This is all assuming that this work is going to actually be successful on the part of Gwyn. This is assuming that she's going to prevent the Civil War that leads to all this anyways. But
the attempt is still a violation of the Temporal Prime Directive. So,
assuming that it wasn't part of the original timeline in the first place because it's time travel.
It's all a mess, and that's why I want to know what Temporal Investigations has to say about all this.
It would be fun if they show up. That would be.
Does she have a moral duty to try to prevent the Civil War, though? It's interesting. That I would think so. That even though you've seen the future, I think you still have a moral duty. Anyway, it apparently took a month to get the Protostar crew back to Earth. They made it on their own.
And we have a callback to Star Trek IV: The Search for Whales, where they land right by the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco Bay.
Pretty much the same spot where that bird of prey went down, which is kind of funny. I thought it had to be an intentional homage. I mean, this is animation. You can do whatever you want. But I did like that. A little echo of Voyage Home. And it's interesting that they made their own way there, even though they didn't. They were in a rudimentary shuttle. Not sure what they ate for a month and all that.
In fact, they said we don't even have food, right? Before they got in it. So what did you eat for a month?
I mean, I don't know what Rock eats, but
well, actually, I mean, you can fast for a month. That will not kill you, and if you're a healthy individual.
You do need water, though, right?
You do need water. So guess what they drank?
You so
Hey, they've said that's what they do on Star Trek anyway. Just they run it through a replicator first.
Yep. So then we get this scene before, I don't know whether it's like the Starfleet board or the Starfleet Academy board or whatever it is, but some Starfleet officers. This idea that somehow we're still these kids have saved Starfleet, but we're still going to charge them with stealing the protostar, even though all they did was salvage it. They salvaged a lost ship. There's no crime in that, right? I thought that was a weird change.
Again, talking about throwback, this is going back to Star Trek 4, where yes, they saved the world, but Admiral Kirk got demoted back to Captain Kirk.
But they did steal the Enterprise.
But still, right. it's another throwback to that.
I guess.
It's a kids show, so they're hyping the drama.
Yeah.
And it's bureaucracy. I mean, look at their news stories regularly here in America about insane, things that petty government officials have done that make no sense.
And
True.
And remember, just because charges are filed doesn't mean they're actually guilty. And of course, the charges were dropped, which means they're found, not even not guilty. They were just dropped. There are no charges.
Although, those officers seemed pretty intent, though. Like they were still dubious.
The 24th century needs to learn the phrase prosecutorial discretion.
Right.
And, you're talking bureaucracy here. If somebody's job is to charge you and to get a conviction, they're going to try to get a conviction. So.
Yeah, something tells me Vulcans are pretty big on bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So no academy for any of them, which is good because academy would have, having them go to the academy would have sort of stifled the storytelling possibilities.
3 years later.
I know we would have had a time jump, but I like this idea. So warrant officers is a thing in present day military. They're sort of they're officers, but they're not commissioned officers in that sense, and they don't go up in rank like commissioned officers do. They're more than enlisted. Father Cory, you can probably do a better job of explaining it.
They are a rank between enlisted and officer, and they do have Air Force, I believe, is the only branch of the U.S. military that does not have warrant officers. They used to, but they don't anymore. And the reason for the distinction between a warrant officer and a commissioned officer is a commissioned officer, at least in the U.S. military, is actually commissioned by the Senate, by the Congress.
Yeah,
it's actually, of course, it's a rubber stamp. I mean, they I think every so often they have a vote of we've got these officers who need to be promoted. We have these officers who need to come in. Okay, stamp. Next. It's just one of those things that no one ever thinks about. But it is, but warrant officers aren't. They are an officer class. They are considered above enlisted, but they come in on the military zone warrants.
Right.
That's why they're called warrant officers. And so but they are separate from enlisted and separate from regular officers, and that's why Janeway could do that. She could say, "Well, I'm going to take them on my own warrant as officers."
Mm-hmm.
And usually there's, at least today, there's usually some kind of specialist. They specialize in a particular, like the Army has helicopter pilots who are warrant officers, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So
and that's how it was in the Air Force as well originally, is there were certain fields that were warrant officers that either they downgraded to enlisted or upgraded to commissioned officer.
And the kids, with the exception of Dal, all have specialities. Jankum is an engineer, Rock is a scientist, Murph is a security guy, and Zero is a science guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And as I was looking online, that with Voyager, the bars that they had for the Maquis crew were supposed to be warrant officer ranks.
Right. Interesting. There's So they are all pulled in, and Dal gets to go too. There's a exception made for him, and Gwyn is going to go off on her own. We mentioned, and you mentioned, Rock becomes a xenobiologist, and she's apparently the Starfleet officer who talks to her about becoming a xenobiologist is actually based on a real scientist person, Erin McDonald. She's an astrophysicist, aerospace engineer. And she's been a science advisor on Star Trek since 2019, I guess.
Nice.
And apparently you can become a xenobiologist by just watching a 2-hour video on YouTube or something, because that's all the training Rock seems to need.
Although, yeah. And let's see, then and then Jankum gets to show off his prosthesis there. Zero gets a new suit, which is much more shiny and white.
It is so open the pod bay doors, Hal.
It does look like it.
It still looks like one of their EV suits.
Yeah. Still looking for Murph to kind of grow beyond the squeaky.
Season 2.
Yeah, yep. I'm looking forward to that, though.
He's got more expressive since he cocooned. So
yeah. I think we'll see more. I want to give D. Bradley Baker like a little more to do than make cooing noises. That's pretty much what it is.
He played other characters.
Yeah. So that we have this farewell scene between Gwen and Dal kissed her last time and she went, whoa. But this time she kisses him. So we have this mutual relationship thing going just as she's going away. My guess is for season 2, she's not going far. We will see Gwen. I thought it was interesting that they reveal that there is a new protostar class and a new ship, but Janeway says, I've got bigger plans for you. So they're evidently going to a different ship, which wasn't revealed.
I didn't get that out of that. I thought she was just saying, I've got big plans for us, not bigger than this protostar. Well, but it was in response to another line, and I think she meant it's more than just we're getting this ship. Right. Not that we're getting a different, bigger ship. We're going to be on this ship, and we're going to go find Chakotay.
I think there's some dispute on that because Memory Alpha also agrees with that. Janeway's line is, this is not going to be our ship. We have a bigger one.
Yeah, because they were talking. The line they were talking about was that ship that they were looking at. Oh, we're going to be on this ship, and she's like, "No, I got bigger plans for you." Now that doesn't mean that they won't be on this ship. It's just like right now is not the time.
Right, it's a possibility too. We'll see. I mean, it's all up in the air. It would be interesting. I don't know if they're going back to the Dauntless or something like that, or a whole nother thing. But it's not going. The show isn't dependent on any particular ship, so it's that's the interesting aspect
bring
of it.
Back Voyager. No, I'm kidding. Pull Voyager out of mothballs.
Or the Voyager A or something along those lines. Because we know there's a J. We saw that. Eventually.
In an alternate future that nobody cares about and will hopefully be aborted.
Yes, that's right. Maybe by doing this with bringing Chakotay back, they prevent that future.
That would be great.
Yes, let's undo all of that. All right. And that's where we finished the episode and the season. Any final thoughts or thoughts forward to the next season, Father Cory?
We got some feedback here. We'll kind of talk about the season as a whole, but I've really enjoyed this season. I've really enjoyed, been surprised by Prodigy. I figured, okay, it was going to be a kid show. And, when we first heard about this, we had kind of talked about this amongst ourselves and weren't sure which way it was going to go. And we kind of played it by ear, whether or not to do episode by episode recaps. And of course, obviously we decided to do the recaps, and it was worth it. I'm glad we did. But this show really surprised me.
And I'm always in favor of, because like with both Lower Decks and this, you two were more skeptical of, is this going to be worth doing the recaps? And it's like start with the recaps, and we can bail on them if it's not worth it. Well, as opposed to don't do them and then decide later we wanted to.
And to be fair, I mean, you can also fix that too. I mean, you can go back and fix that too. That's not a problem. But to be fair, we kind of been burned by Discovery. Other projects that are out there, not just Star Trek World, where it's just kind of like, this is even worth talking about, much less doing recaps of. So, right. But I've been very pleasantly surprised. I've really enjoyed it. I've looked forward to each episode when it's come out. It's that's where it was disappointing the way they broke up the season, where it was 5 episodes, 10 episodes. And I'm wondering if they kind of realized, and that might have been COVID related issues, which probably was. But I think that next season will be one chunk, even if it's concurrent with other Star Trek. So I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm looking forward to see where they go with it and how they're gonna get Chakotay and crew back, because we know I mean, that's pretty clear that that's where they're going. So,
Jimmy,
I enjoyed the season as well. I didn't have as much confidence going into it as I did with Lower Decks, but it was, after watching the first episode, it was clear that this was going to be, to me, that this was going to be a good series. I suspect we will only get 2 seasons, which is fine. I may be wrong about that. They may go for more, but I suspect the initial plotting and order was for 2 seasons, and so that's what they plotted with a finish at the end of the second season. I suspect we will get it in 2 chunks of 10 episodes, like we did this time, since that they're calling their 20 episode thing a season, but adult television seasons these days tend to be like 10 episodes, and so I think it'll be presented in 2 chunks of 10, just like Discovery and Picard and Lower Decks are.
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed the first half. I didn't get fully invested until the second half of this season, when it really felt like things were going someplace. And I think that's about when Janeway got introduced, the Admiral Janeway got introduced. And so it felt like, okay, now we're going somewhere. It is fascinating. We started this Prodigy journey over a year ago in November of 2021, and now we're just finishing up, at the beginning of 2023. It's been a long beginning.
Been a long road from there to here.
I knew that was you knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. It's been a long road. That one thing. So, and I'm interested in seeing where it goes and whether it can maintain that Prodigy spark with the new situation. I hope it will. I think it will. It based on how we ended, I think there's some promise to this series. I'm really excited about it, and I'm kind of look at it a broader picture. Picard is ending with season 3, so we're about to lose that. So all we've got left is Discovery and Strange New Worlds. And for live action, sorry, that's what I was going to say. So Discovery and Strange New Worlds for live action, and we've got Lower Decks and Prodigy for animated. There's then this mythical Section 31. I can't imagine Paramount is looking to decrease the amount of Star Trek, so I'm hoping we're going to get more, whether animated or live action Star Trek soon.
And there's still been rumors of a Starfleet Academy series at some point, which is going to be more teen romance drama type thing.
I hope not, but I mean, some of that stuff is okay, but I hope it's not all that and sacrificing the storytelling and action. But we'll see how that goes.
You remember was it the 200th episode of SG-1 where we got glimpses into how they would make it if it were a TV series, and one of them was the teen angst version of Stargate SG-1.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
There was that one. There was Farscape. There was
Right. I like how at the end of Farscape they show us the Farscape version of SG-1, and then at the end of the Flash sideways to see that, Ben Browder says, "What was that?"
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they also had the Star Trek one where they're on the I can't remember what ship, the Prometheus, the ship SG-1. Yeah. But it was all Star Trek, like, Ben Browder was Kirk,
Mm-hmm.
It was
I'm looking forward to seeing that again. So all right, so that's where we end with Prodigy season 1. We're looking forward to season 2 whenever that comes. I did mention we have some listener feedback, so let's get to that now. The first feedback comes from the Sage of Rakaseka on YouTube, who writes, "I know Jimmy has an inner ship geek somewhere in there. #embrace the ship geek."
I'll embrace my inner ship geek when ships are real, and then only for a while, because ultimately Janeway's a toaster and ships are wheels.
And then Kelly Brown on Facebook writes, "I've been really impressed with Prodigy. Going into this, I wasn't too excited about this show. I didn't think I would enjoy a kiddie Star Trek. I was wrong. Yes, the show is for kids, but the writing is really smart and the story is engaging. I like that I cannot predict what will happen. There's been times when I thought it would go one direction, only to be pleasantly surprised when they go in another unexpected direction. You can tell that those that work on the show really care about it. So.
Yeah, and that illustrates how it is possible to write in a way that's accessible to both children and adults. There are lots of great examples of shows that have crossover appeal. The original Land of the Lost had that. The Animaniacs had that. Rugrats had that. And this has that. So you don't have, just because you're writing for kids doesn't have to mean you're doing something horrendously stupid like Dora the Explorer.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, Pixar was famously. Yeah.
But I would add to that list, Avatar: The Last Airbender is another one of those where it's clearly written on more of about the same level as the Prodigy, but very adults love it, and it's a wonderfully done series.
Yeah, and even live action like Doctor Who back in the early classic Doctor Who was written for all ages and that sort of thing.
Yeah. As opposed to I'm the map. I'm the map.
I was spared that with my kids. So, all right. So thank you for your feedback. We love getting feedback. And so we appreciate we'd love to hear some more feedback. Before we go, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Sarah N., Victor P., Ben B., Dean S., and Brent W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. Again, we would love to hear what you think of Supernova Part 2 or Prodigy as a whole. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You can now watch the Secrets of Star Trek in full video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia as we wave to the camera. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation episode, Who Watches the Watchers? Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and until next season, live logs and proper.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, now go boldly.